This presentation will discuss how race and ethnicity in community sport development has an influence on sport participation. It will discuss definitions of both race and ethnicity, and then will explain the different theories and key concepts around this subject. It will then discuss the impact it has on sport participation. Race and ethnicity are two concepts that are often used interchangeably, but they have distinct meanings. Race and ethnicity in sport are complex issues that have an impact on participation, representation, and experiences. There are a number of factors that contribute to the disparities in race and ethnicity in sport, including historical and cultural factors, socio-economic factors, and cultural values and preferences. Ultimately, the goal is to create a sporting world where everyone has the opportunity to participate and thrive, regardless of their race or ethnicity. Race is a social construct used to group people based on shared physical or social qualities into groups generally viewed as distinct within a given society. The concept of race has evolved over time, and its meaning has disputed and contested by scholars and activists alike. It's important to note that race is not the same as ethnicity. Race is a complex, controversial topic. There is no easy answer to the question of what it is. However, it is important to understand the social and historical forces that have shaped our understanding of race, and to challenge racist beliefs and attitudes whenever we encounter them. Individual racism is when a person makes decisions or acts in a way that is discriminatory because of another person's race. It can be intentional or unintentional. An example of this is stereotyping. Institutional racism is when a system or policy is discriminatory, even if the people who implement it do not have racist intentions. It can be embedded in the laws. Internalized racism is a form of racism that occurs when people of colour internalize negative messages about their own race and believe that they are inferior to people of other races. Moving on, ethnicity is a complex concept that can be defined in many different ways. In general, it refers to shared sense of identity and belonging that is based on common cultural heritage, including language, religion, customs, and traditions. Ethnicity has a significant impact on sport in both terms of participation and representation. For example, athletes from certain ethnic groups are more likely to be represented at the highest levels of sport. White athletes make up the majority of athletes in the Olympic Games and professional sport leagues around the world. This lack of diversity in sport has a number of negative consequences. Critical race theory is an interdisciplinary movement who seek critically to examine the law as it intersects with issues of race and to challenge mainstream liberal approaches to racial justice. It examines society and culture through a critical race lens, which acknowledges that race is not a biological reality, but a socially constructed category that is used to oppress and exploit people of colour. It's a theoretical framework that examines how race and racism are embedded in social and legal systems. Kevin Hilton explains how critical race theory can be applied to sport. He explains that it should lead to a process of social change in sport, which could include radical hiring practices that prioritise black people in sport management. It can be used to examine the ways in which race and racism can influence people's access to and experiences in sport. However, critical race theory can also present challenges to the dominant ideas of colour blindness and equal opportunity. Colour blindness is a racial ideology that asserts that one should treat others regardless of their race or colour. It is based on the belief that race is not a relevant factor in social interactions or decision making. Bonilla Silva, 2006, argues that colour blindness is a myth and that it is used to justify and maintain racial inequality. It is also argued that critics say that colour blindness can lead to denial of the existence of racism and its failure to address its root causes. It's important to note that colour blindness is not the same as anti-racism. Anti-racism is a movement that seeks to dismantle systemic racism and to create more of an equitable society. Colour blindness ignores the realities of racism, while anti-racism acknowledges and confronts them. Colour blindness can lead to denial of privilege, while anti-racism works to dismantle it. At this point, we can see sport participation is influenced heavily by race and ethnicity. Sport participation can be influenced by race and ethnicity, as non-white people are more likely to face discrimination and harassment. This leads to their lack of involvement in sports. Sport England 2019 shows that black and other ethnic origin groups are less likely to be active. Research also shows that people from certain racial and ethnic groups are more likely to live in poverty. This can limit their access to opportunities to participate in sport. For example, sport fees, equipment and transportation costs can be prohibitive for families with low incomes. Sport England explains how for minority ethnic groups there isn't the same opportunities or options in place as there is for other people. Some reasons may be lack of representation. Lack of representation is one of the main reasons for lack of sporting opportunities for minority groups. When people from minority groups do not see themselves represented in sport, they are less likely to believe that they can succeed in it. This can lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy, where people from minority groups are underrepresented in sport because they are less likely to participate in it. Cultural barriers are another reason for lack of sporting opportunities for minority groups. Some cultures may not place a high value on sport, or they may have different preferences for certain sports. For example, some cultures may view sport as a way to develop discipline and character, while others may view it as a form of recreation. Some religions may have restrictions on sport participation, such as dress codes or gender segregation. For example, some Muslim women may not be allowed to participate in sports where they will be required to wear revealing clothing. Finally, systemic racism is one of the main reasons for lack of sporting opportunities for minority groups. Systemic racism refers to the ways in which racism is embedded in the institutions and systems of society. Minority groups are less likely to be recruited and hired for coaching and administrative positions in sport. This limits the numbers of minority role models in sport and makes it more difficult for minority athletes to succeed. By addressing systemic racism in sport, we can create a more inclusive and equitable sporting world. In conclusion, race and ethnicity can have a significant impact on sport participation. People from certain racial and ethnic groups are more likely to participate in certain sports, while others may face barriers to participation. Critical race theory provides a valuable lens for understanding the ways in which race and ethnicity influence participation in sport. CRT scholars argue that race is a social construct that is used to maintain white privilege and to oppress people of colour. It can help us to understand how racism is embedded in institutions and systems of sport and how it limits opportunities available to people of colour. By taking steps like increasing the diversity of coaching and administrative ranks in sports, challenging the dominant narratives about race and sport, providing more opportunities for non-white people to participate in sports, this can help massively to create a more inclusive and equitable sporting world. Thank you for listening. Reference list as follows.